Good morning. Welcome back to the second lecture for interviews. We finished in the first lecture till the employment interview types. We discussed all of the types. Now we'll get started with the second kind, which is the disciplinary interview. So let's begin with the meaning. So, a disciplinary procedure is basically a process for dealing with perceived employee misconduct. So, the main idea is that in case of any indiscipline or misconduct that has been observed or perceived in an organization, the person who has been responsible for this misconduct will be sent in for a disciplinary interview. All right, so the organizations typically have a lot of types of disciplinary procedures to invoke depending on the severity of the misconduct that is observed. Now, it is a practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior. That means the whole idea of this disciplinary interview is to train people to adhere to certain kind of rules and regulations or some standardized behavior in that organization. So, it is a framework that is established in order to have the employees meet some standards of conduct. Okay, so moving on, there can be several reasons for disciplining an employee. Now, there are two types of major categories: issues related to conduct and issues related to performance. Uh, Issues that are related to conduct can be many reasons, like absenteeism in case of employee taking regular leaves or irregularity at work, and next for any kind of negligence at work, for use of alcohol or narcotic substances, for any kind of harassment, stealing, for the wrong dress code, for casual dressing, for falsification of documents, or for tardiness, or that means, inefficiency and laziness. Now, issues related to performance can include low productivity and not meeting the target, or high error doing work but then with a lot of errors, and then repetition of a specific error despite discussing it, despite being told not to repeat it. So in that cases, in issues related to conduct and performance, one can be sent for a discipline interview. So, the objective of a disciplinary interview remains very simple. It is to make the employees more willing to accept the rules and regulations and procedures of a specific organization. It is to help develop a spirit of tolerance and a desire to make adjustments. For those who feel maladjusted, a disciplinary interview opens up and makes them more amenable to the rules of the organization, to be able to impart an element of certainty despite a lot of several indifferences in informal behavior, right? So for a standardization of the code of conduct, and to give and seek direction and responsibility so that people are aware where we are headed, how to head there, and what are the responsibilities of certain job positions, and also to increase workers efficiency, which remains a central role after all. All right, so moving on to the aspects of discipline. Firstly, we'll discuss the positive aspect. So, the positive aspect refers to rewards, appreciation, constructive support, incentives, and payments. This is when the employee is following the particular code of conduct that has been standardized, and when it happens when the management applies the principles of positive motivation, and all the employees feel thoroughly motivated to adhere to the code of conduct, and also happens when the leadership is efficiently managed. So yes, there are a lot of positive aspects, as we can see, towards a disciplinary interview being conducted. Now, considering the positive ones, there are also negative aspects of the same disciplinary interview, and they refer to when people are forced or constrained to obey orders. Now, not everybody will be that flexible to following a particular standardized code of conduct. So this can be very difficult for them to adhere to certain rules and regulations, to perform their tasks in accordance with the rule and regulations. Now, not everybody is very familiar with working according to how one is told, and it can be difficult for people, especially the creative ones. Now, also indulging in antisocial and anti-organizational activities. Now there are two aspects. Say there is a particular discipline code to be followed. So for people who are not very social, they might turn into antisocial people, and also they can indulge in anti-organizational activities, say indulging in rumors or grapevine non-formal ways of communication. So that all can come up in that case. Now also results in layoff, suspension, fine, red listing. So when people really don't adhere to the code of conduct that has been specified by an organization, it can result in suspension or fine payment by people who are not following those rules and regulations. So yes, definitely there are negative aspects also. So that's it for disciplinary interviews. Now we'll move on to talk about appraisal interviews, which is the type of interview that all of you will once in your life or probably more look forward to attending. Now, it is simply a discussion following a performance appraisal in which the supervisor and employee discuss the employee's rating, and the possible remedial actions are to be taken. So, this is a part of the standard procedure that there's a certain time to it, usually a year, and it is conducted by the HR of the organization. So the HR will get talking to your supervisor and discussing your performance. Then your appraisal will be discussed, and wherever you're lagging, you will be offered remedies or remedial actions. And otherwise, if you've performed really well, you might be in for a salary increase or a bonus, and there will be some contracts and terms that will be discussed. And yes, it has to be taken forward. Now, appraisal is definitely a conversation between the employee and the manager when they happen. But these kind of conversations normally happen daily. But the annual appraisal interview, however, offers the opportunity to systematically discuss the work and performance of the past year, the tasks that were given, the work and the conditions and the cooperation. Everything will be discussed, the positive as well as the negative aspects. Now, all the problems and the misunderstandings will be resolved. There will be a mutually voiced acknowledgement, and good things will be appreciated, and a critique when a factual matter will be dispensed. And also, there will be an agreement on measures to boost the development and further education, or employees are in for further training if they lag somewhere. Now also there's a mutual agreement on long term goals, and the focus points are highlighted. Now from the manager's perspective, the success depends on how well an employee can carry out his or her tasks, and the appraisal interview enables the HR to fulfill his or her leadership role as well. And the manager agrees on the goals with the employee, therefore providing the employee with the direction to go with. He also facilitates important information regarding the university or the organizational unit, and they together evaluate the goals with the employee, and they conduct casual research. Then the manager receives information regarding himself, employees, and the organization as a whole. And then it is the responsibility of the manager to assist as well as promote the well being of his or her employees. So, from the employee's perspective, if we discuss the appraisal interview, an employee's success and career depend on how well he or she develop his or her skills and competencies, performance, and job satisfaction as well. And the employee will, in an appraisal interview, receive a guideline on the basis of which criteria he or she will be evaluated. Then there will be a feedback that will be given on his or her performance, and the employee receives information regarding the university or the organizational unit, and it can influence his or her area of work and help him set goals. Now, an employee is also supposed to get information on possible paths for development, for improvement. Any requirements in training can also be voiced out if there is a need for a training in order to perform better. So that's it for the appraisal interview. Now, moving on to the exit interview. This is conducted when an employee leaves the company for any reason, and it is aimed at eliciting information about the job or related matters. Then it helps the employer in having a better insight into what is right or wrong about the company and make further amendments. And it highlights the work of an HR manager because he or she is the person to conduct this type of interview. Now, the goal is to discover the reason for why the employees are not being able, are not being able to stay in the company. Also, it gives positive attention to departing employees in order to alleviate possible frustrations or negative attitude toward the organization in order to increase retention. And it allows the departing employees to have a voice about what their work experience was like. So it is a way for collecting any kind of feedback. And this valuable feedback from departing employees is about the compensation, the working conditions, the management, and the culture of the organization. Now, an important thing to remember about the exit interview is that neither the interviewee nor the interviewer should ask or disclose any information about whichever new firm or the possible future prospects of the departing employee. And there is a confidentiality clause to it that it should be made clear to the departing employee that the information provided through the exit interview will be highly confidential. So such information will be used in a summary format and shared with the supervisors and need to know individuals only in order to address any retention issues, employee morale, and alleged allegations of illegal practices. Only in that case will the information from the exit interview be shared, and only to a certain limited personnel. All right, so that's enough about the exit interview. Moving on to the counseling interview. It is conducted by a psychologist who is hired on an ad hoc basis. Okay, so in this kind of interview, questions are intended to assess personal traits such as reliability or dependability, etc. Now, in a counseling interview, it is simply a process through which one person helps the other by purposeful conversation in an understanding atmosphere. Counseling is discussion of an employee's problem that usually has an emotional content to it. Say somebody is suffering through personal problems at home, and in order to help the employee cope up with the situation better, a counseling interview is recommended by the organization. So for that, an external counsel is provided and hired, and the employee is sent for regular sessions where they can open up about their problems and best possible solutions can be given. Now, counseling seeks to improve the employee's mental health, and people feel comfortable about themselves and about other people and are able to meet the demands when they are in good mental health. So that is the goal of this interview, to improve their mental health, and definitely that will impact their performance as well. So the situations that call for counseling are when an employee, say, violates certain company standards, when an employee is consistently late or absent, or when the employee's productivity is down. When one employee behaves in such a way that the productivity of others might be negatively impacted, when two employees have a conflict that is becoming public and it is affecting the work area and the performance of other people, when you want to compliment an individual, even then you send for a counseling interview, and when you want to delegate a new task in order to make them more open and receive the new task well, then also a counseling interview can be held. Now, it is also performed in case of deteriorating and then consistent poor performance of an employee. It is recommended by the company to the employee, then an ombudsman or somebody from outside the firm or a consulting psychologist, which acts as a neutral party, is hired from time to time for the employee sessions in order to maintain some political neutrality as well as confidentiality of the employees, as well as in order to ease opening up of the employee about the problems he or she is facing, have given that it is not going to affect their company repo, because that person is an outsider, not somebody who's familiar or from the firm. And so he or she feels safe as an employee to disclose any kind of information. Okay, so there are a lot of do's and don'ts for interviews, as you know. So we'll discuss the do's first. So it's a good idea to groom yourself well. That means you have to be dressed on point, formals only, light colored clothes preferably. You have to be positive and you have to show some enthusiasm. You must carry some extra copies of your resume. Again, your resume will be in a certain set pattern, and we'll discuss this in the next chapter whenever we talk about resumes. Now, you have to remember to always cheerfully smile, be very polite, assertive, firm at the same time, but very courteous at the same time as well. You have to be very genuine and be truthful when you are answering the questions being fired at you. And it's a very good idea to maintain a good eye contact and look into the eyes of the people. If it is more than one, then all at a certain legible time. So eye contact is a must. Now, for the don'ts, uh, you have to be very careful about not demonstrating overconfidence. That's a strict no. All right, you must. There will be questions that there will be no answer for, and even if you don't meet them in the most part of your interview, that doesn't mean that you're a no at all. All right. So next, do not answer any question before it has been completed. So do not stop the interviewer at any point of time before he or she passes the has ended the question and it's time for you to reply. Do not get overexcited or interrupt him in the middle. Do not keep talking continuously. Give the other person a chance to talk as well. Do not be rude, and it is highly advised not to get into an argument with the interviewers. That is not a positive trait. Meanwhile, what you also shouldn't do is fiddle with your tie, pen, or any piece of furniture or stationery at hand. Please remain calm, and you can rest your arms on the chair if it has an armrest, or on the table. Next, do not shake your hand first unless the interviewer extends his hand for a handshake. So it is strictly advised that you be clear about your expectations from the job. If there are any queries that you feel you need an answer for, please feel free to clarify them. Do not be unclear about any clause that you don't understand. Your interview is not just for the other person to talk and dictate terms. You can ask whatever you don't understand or you have presumptions about. So we've covered the major chunk of the topic till here. Now we're only left with preparations, and we will take that up in the next lecture. And that will cover preparations before the interview, on the day of the interview, as well as a follow up. So we'll take that up in the next lecture. Meanwhile, stay safe and take care of yourself. Bye.